what you're facing with this and why it happens and what your rights and responsibilities are. But first of all, a little bit about Cobb Legal Aid, who we are, what we do. So we're a nonprofit law firm. We provide free legal advice and or assistance to low-income people for their most basic civil legal matters. And we prioritize issues of safety and shelter. So last year alone, our attorneys in the Atlanta area, the 5 counties around Atlanta, we handled more than 20,000 cases that affected 45,000 people. So the types of cases that we handle are family law, housing, education, like special education, and public benefits. And our services are tied to income eligibility. So there's, depending on the case, who we can actually offer representation to. We can offer advice to anyone who wants the advice, so we can give you the specific facts about your case. But as far as representation goes, we're set up to offer legal representation to people who are at the poverty level or just above that. So, but if you call our office, we can give you the specifics. So we have some brochures up here that have our telephone number on it. So if anyone would like that, you can come see me afterward. We have a table out here. Donna is also from the office, and we have our phone number on that. And we also have AtlantaLegalAid.org. You can go on there also and fill out a form if you'd like to see if your case, if you can be represented as well, or if you have questions. So when to call us if you're being evicted, if your landlord refuses to make repairs, if you're experiencing domestic violence, if your disabled child's needs are not being met, that's specifically the individualized education plan, that's something that we can maybe help you with. And also if your public benefits are being terminated. So this is a general presentation about Georgia law. So if you want specifics about your case, about what you might be facing, then call us Monday through Thursday between 9 and noon. And that number also is on the brochure here. So what is an eviction? An eviction is the court process by which a landlord obtains possession of the property from the tenant. So the landlord must obtain an eviction order from the court before forcing the tenant to leave. So just this week I had a client, usually most afternoons I'm in the Cobb County Magistrate Court Clerk's office. Someone from Legal Aid is in there every afternoon from 1 to 5. We talk to tenants. We're facing eviction, that's what we're there for, but I end up talking to everyone there about most of their cases. But I had someone come in and she's in the process of facing an eviction, but her landlord had put a note on her door saying they didn't like something she had done, and so she has to be out by March 28th, well, that's tomorrow. And I'm sending an email first thing tomorrow to her landlord's attorney saying this is an illegal eviction. You cannot do this. She has a hearing on April 14th. If that's still an issue, you can bring it up at the hearing, but until April 14th, she's in that apartment.
That's right.
So the definitions, a couple definitions you might hear. I'll actually skip those for now because of time and they're pretty dry. But the plaintiff in an eviction is the landlord. It's the person filing the lawsuit, the eviction, seeking to get the property back. The defendant is the tenant who is being evicted. So those are the two main terms. So in the eviction process, it's a 5-step process. First of all, the landlord, actually even before the first step, the landlord needs to make a demand for the property back. But the first step is the landlord files the eviction. So the landlord goes into the magistrate court clerk's office and fills out the paperwork, pays the fee, and files the eviction. Or they can do that online as well. And then in that, the second step is the service of the eviction to the tenant. So the landlord actually has to arrange for the sheriff to do it or a private process server to take that notice of the eviction to the tenant, put it on the tenant's door, and also mail it. So that's usually the 2-step process. It's called tack and mail. So once the tenant has been notice of the eviction, then the tenant, and this is one of the places where Georgia law is one of the worst in the country, the tenant only has 7 days to answer that eviction. And in a lot of states it's 30, in Georgia it's 7. And an answer, we'll get to those specifics in a minute, but if you don't answer, you don't get your day in court, the eviction is automatic, the tenant is in default. And here's a statistic that actually I just found out that actually terrifies me. Only 29% of tenants who were served eviction bothered to answer their eviction in the last 3 months when they restarted evictions last year. If you don't answer the eviction, you don't get your day in court. So the fourth step is the hearing. So the tenant answers, and then there's going to be a hearing. And I've quit trying to guess when those hearings, because it could be anything from 2 weeks or it could be 7 weeks, anywhere in there. You get the hearing. So that's when you come to court, the landlord comes to court, they're in the attorney. And then the fifth step is the decision, either for one party or the other. So that's a quick overview of the eviction process. So there are 3 reasons why a tenant can be evicted. Number 1 is the term of the lease has ended. If it's a year lease, at the end of a year, if the landlord wants the property back, they can take it back. There's no legal requirement that they extend that lease anymore because of COVID and the moratorium being lifted. So the lease term has ended and there's no renewal. That tenant is said to be a holdover tenant, and that's when the eviction can happen. The second part is if money is owed. And in Georgia, if money's owed and people think I get 5 days, not necessarily. If that's what the lease allows, then yeah, you get the 5 days. Under Georgia law, if the rent is a day late, the next day the landlord can say, hey, pay me or I'm filing, and then they file, and they can do that. So that's the law there. And the third reason, there's 3 reasons. The third reason is a violation of the lease, a provision in the lease. Like a dog is one of the most common. When somebody has a pet and the lease forbids pets and it becomes an issue, the landlord can file an eviction. So when does the lease end? It depends on the terms of the lease. And normally if the lease ends, and you have to look at what the lease says, because that's the question I'm always going to have for people when they come to court. They start asking me questions. If I'm in the clerk's office, I'll say, if you have a lease, let's look at what the terms say, because it always goes to that. Once the lease term ends, it goes to a month-to-month. Generally, it's 60 days. So a lot of times there's no lease. If there's no lease, that's fine. If a tenant is paying and the landlord's accepting the money, the law says, okay, what you have is a month-to-month tenancy. Any changes to that, increase or termination, notice to vacate, got to give 60 days notice. That's one of the most common reasons I'm able to help people get their evictions dismissed, is because there was no 60 days notice. You know, there's a fight or whatever, you're month to month, the landlord says, you got to be out next week, and they file the eviction. Guess what? We're going to get that one dismissed. That's one of the easiest ones. So for non-payment of rent, if the tenant does not pay the rent, the landlord generally has the right to file an eviction. There's generally no grace period, and financial hardship is not a defense. And it's heartbreaking. I hear it every day. People come in, medical, loss of a spouse, death of a breadwinner in the household, that type of thing, divorce. All these things are heartbreaking and they happen. They're not a defense to an eviction. Some people want the judge, they're like, I'm sure that judge has a heart. The judges do have a heart, but they are judges and they have to follow the law. And if the money is owed and there's no grounds for a defense, then the most the judge can give is 7-day writ of possession, but we'll get that in a second. The lease may contain rules about fees. Some people come in there and ask about the fees that are added to the eviction. Well, what is if the lease allows for 10% of the rent as a late fee, then that's what the late fee is, unfortunately, and those can add up quickly. Now, whether or not, the landlord those fees are accumulating, why they're accumulating, that might be an issue, but then we can talk about that.
Hi, I have a question on that last thing. I wanted to ask you, now I know everybody have hardships, but we just went through a global pandemic that was nobody's fault. Thousands of people lost their jobs for no fault of their own, and not just in Georgia, all over the country. Right. So these laws need to be changed for that reason. And they have some providers. For that reason, because housing is a human right. Right. You understand?
And there's provisions right now for.
I understand. I just wanted to ask that question because what you said, we know everybody have hardships, but this hardship here was nobody thought this was going to happen to the whole country. Right. You understand?
There's little assistance available, and we have a few.
I'm still waiting. I'm waiting on rental assistance. I gave them all my documents at Sweetwater. I'm still waiting. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for
thank you for bringing that up, because that's a very valid point. So for lease violations, So we talked about that a little bit, like if whatever's in the lease, and so if the land, and this goes back to the 60 days notice, if there's a month to month and suddenly the landlord doesn't want to have visitors over, this came out in court the other day, the judge said, look, you can have that, but you gotta give 60 days notice if that's gonna be a change. So provisions like that, they have to be in the lease, and if the lease is gonna change, you have to have 60 days notice of it. So filing an eviction case, either at the magistrate's courts or the filing fee must be paid, and there's a standard form. Now, this is what the standard eviction complaint looks like. That's one of the things also, if a tenant comes in and they want to talk to me about their eviction, I'm going to say, where is that summons that was placed on the door, because it's going to say one of those 3 reasons. So if it's for money that's being owed, that's different than if it's a holdover, like how the law applies. And that's all going to be on that complaint. If money's owed, it's going to say how much. This is what the online form looks like. You can do, the landlords can file online. They create an account on the e-file website. Service, so a lot of people ask about service. Normally people will use the sheriff. Now this is the service of the eviction at the very beginning. We'll talk about that at the end of a minute. But the sheriff comes out, tacks it to the door, and then also mails it. That's all part of it. Once that service happens, like we said before, the tenant has 7 days to answer. So this is important. When a tenant files an answer to an eviction, you can do it online. You can also come into the magistrate court clerk's office and file. The time and date of the hearing, if the tenant comes in and file, most of the time and date of the hearing will be on the answer form. And this is what the answer looks like online. It's a little confusing here, but that is an option as well. Now notice I have this one like large letters in bold, so it's important. If a timely answer is not filed, the court will immediately issue an eviction order without a hearing, and that's immediate. They can do that. Now there is a way around that, but it takes a special motion. I spend a lot of my days helping people with those motions. They've missed the deadline for it. Like I say, it's only 7 days in Georgia. I had one client, she was served on December 21st. Well, she had left town for the holidays for December 20th. Served, and I feel like, well, I'm not going to get into speculation there, but she served on December 21st. She's got an answer on December 28th. Well, what happens in there? Christmas Eve, presents, Santa, all that. She's out of town, and then she didn't get back until after the deadline. So that's a situation where, look, we'll fill out this motion, and the judges are going to be reasonable. They're going to listen to that eviction. But if the tenant didn't know to come in and seek our assistance, we wouldn't have been able to help her with that, and she would have just gotten the eviction. And it makes me wonder how many people missed that. So this is very important. So the tenant, so like I said, there are 3 reasons for filing an eviction. There are also 3 responses answering the eviction for a tenant. You can admit, and one of the things that happens is a lot of people quit admit because they feel like they know they're late. And I understand that, you want to be honest, and that's admirable. But if you look at that eviction notice, there's fees on there, there's miscellaneous fees, there's legal fees, there's filing fees. Unless the tenant agrees with it.